I've found that Lydia Bennet has always kind of gotten a bad rap in the Jane Austen fandom, and I'm here to defend her. First off, I just want to show a few examples of why I felt the need to defend Lydia. Posts I found on social media. The way people talk about Lydia, you would think she's the villain of the story instead of, the victim that she is. I am sure we all know the story of Pride and Prejudice, but in case you need a bit of a reminder, Lydia ends up married to Wickham after running away with him. But it's not really her fault at all. Lydia Bennet is 15 years old, and George Wickham is in his mid to late 20s. And I see people go on and on about how their marriage is just as much Lydia's fault as it is Wickham's because you know better at that age. But that's not really true. The human brain doesn't stop developing till the age of 25. Lydia is a full decade away from that point, while Wickham is right there. Wickham is also more worldly than Lydia is from being a man in this era. Wickham has already had sex and knows what all the consequences are, where there's a good chance Lydia does not. And Wickham is not a man Lydia is warned to stay away from at first. He's a man that's friends with her older sister, and her mother likes him. Both Mr. and Mrs. Bennet have failed Lydia. Her parents have both failed to teach her to be wary of men like Wickham. Her mother has pushed her to marry as soon as possible, even though Lydia is hardly an adult by their standards, and still a child by modern ones. Her father admits to just not caring enough to pay attention to his younger daughters. She's a young girl who's been failed by the adults in her life. Her older sisters do try to help her and teach her, but that's not their jobs. Lizzie is only 20, and she often butts heads with her little sister, the way siblings do. Lydia's older sisters should not be the only adults in her life trying to show her what's right and wrong, and she still needed those adults, because she's still very much still a child in many ways. This is the reason why in modern England, Lydia is not even the age of consent, which is 16. Lydia today isn't even considered old enough to have sex, yet she's getting married to a horrible man for the rest of her life. Sure, Lydia has flaws, but people having flaws does not make them bad people who deserve bad things. It's not like she's the only character with flaws in Pride and Prejudice. In fact, the book's pretty famously named after the flaws of the main characters. Yet, people out there blame her for her bad ending, which is entirely Wickham's fault. Not only is Wickham an adult who knows better, but he also has a history of taking advantage of women, in particular young girls. He's constantly trying to charm the women around him. He uses his charm to convince Elizabeth that his story is the truth and that Mr. Darcy isn't to be trusted. And he also tries to seduce Mary King because she's wealthy. And then there's Georgiana Darcy. Wickham, it seems, has a history of preying on 15-year-old girls because he does the same thing to Georgiana. But Georgiana is luckier than Lydia because she's wealthy and she has her older brother, Mr. Darcy, looking out for her. Just a trigger warning, I will be talking about grooming in the next part of this video, and I will add a timestamp to skip to if you don't want to watch that part. I got this next description from Wikipedia just to make sure I accurately defined grooming. For those who don't know, child grooming is befriending and establishing an emotional connection with a child, and sometimes their family, to lower the child's inhibitions with the objective of sexual abuse. The case can be made that Wickham groomed both Lydia and Georgiana, especially Georgiana. He has known her all her life and uses that connection to try and turn her against her family. He goes out of his way to get to her when she's away from Mr. Darcy. Of course she trusts him. He's an old family friend, and he tries to use this position to get her to elope with him. He has obviously not known Lydia as long, but he starts to do the same thing with her. He starts to get the trust of her family by telling his sob story and turning them against Mr. Darcy. And then he gains her trust while she's away at Brighton, the first time she's away from her family. Just like he did with Miss Darcy. It seems that he has a pattern. George Wickham is a serial predator and a true villain, and yet I can think of multiple adaptations that try to redeem him in some way. Usually this is just trying to make him more of a lovable rogue type, like in the Bridget Jones Diaries movies. But I can think of the miniseries Lost in Austin that tries to redeem him at the detriment of another character. In this case, it's actually Georgiana Dorsey. They say she lied about what he did to her, and he's actually an okay guy. This is where this miniseries lost me. It was so concerned about redeeming this man that it just didn't care about the victim blaming of this teenage girl. Lydia, for the most part in adaptations, is just a superficial young girl. Her ending is shown as tragic, but there's definitely a feeling of, well, she deserved it because she wasn't careful enough. No, it's tragic, but Lydia Bennet acting like a teenager when she is one does not mean she deserves to be stuck with a horrible man for the rest of her life. It's her ending in the book because life isn't fair, not because it's what she deserves. If you want to see an adaptation that adapts Lydia really well, I would suggest checking out the Lydia Bennet Diaries. I'm a huge fan of this web show, and I could do an entire another video just about it, but I'll try to keep this brief. But the actress that plays Lydia, Mary-Kate Wiles, does an amazing job of portraying her as a fully fleshed character that gets taken advantage of. The situation's a little different, the show's in a modern setting, and both Lydia and Georgiana, or Gigi in this case, are aged up to be adults. But it makes it clear how much of a manipulator Wickham is. I'll give a bit of a spoiler. Like in most modern retellings, Lydia does not end up with Wickham, because in a modern setting, that's honestly too much to bear. There is a reason why no modern adaptation I can think of has Lydia actually end up with Wickham. She is better off without him. As I wrap up, I'm left thinking about why has defending Lydia Bennet become so important to me? Because it wasn't always. I never villainized her to the extent of the examples I gave earlier, but every time I read the book, I become more sympathetic to her, and I think I know why. I was only about 16 when I first read Pride and Prejudice, basically the same age as Lydia. I felt sad for her, but I didn't realize how much of a child we both were. I could have easily made similar mistakes to the ones she made, but I was more protected than she was. I was protected by both my family and a modern society and laws that recognize that we were both children. And as I age, I realize how young I was and how much girls like me and Lydia both need protection. It seems that the older I get, the younger Lydia is. Thank you for coming to my talk. I wanted to thank Bianca for putting on Virtual JaneCon. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm DramaDork884 on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and anywhere else on the internet. See you around the con. I'm talking a lot. I need water. But in case you need a bit of a... Blech. Blech. Did I say Emma? I was about to say Emma, sorry. But... Blah, blah, blah. Ah! Sorry. That was... An adaptation just kind of treating him as a lovable rogue type. Kind of like in the Bridget Jones Diaries, not the Princess Diaries. Lydia. I have to burp. I don't usually burp that loud. George Wickham is a serial predator and a true victim. This is going swell. That says Bridgerton. It's supposed to say Bride, and it says Bridgerton. Thinking about why has Lydia Bennet, as I rest, that recognize that we are children. No, we aren't our children. We were children. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 27 years old. I'm not a child. I'm so close to being done with that. I don't know what an hour of this.